Hey guys, tonight we step softly into ancient silence. The stars above Jerusalem shimmer like oil on water. The cedar groves sway with a holy hush, and somewhere deeper still, in a quiet chamber not made by human hands, Solomon dreams. But this isn't the kind of dream you shake off with the morning light. This dream lives. It listens. It waits. You stand at the edge of it now. The trees around you are enormous sentinels of time carved from Lebanese wind and holy purpose. Their scent is rich and drowsy resin smoke and the faint sweetness of royal incense. A breeze curls around your ankles. You feel it carry something old, something watching. There's a voice here, not loud but endless. It doesn't speak in words. At first, it hums in symbols, in the swirl of branches, in the glow behind your eyes. Somewhere within that hum, Solomon lies asleep. His brow is calm, his hands folded not in power, but in petition. You see him, this young king, neither lion nor lamb, but something between, and you're about to walk through his inner world. It's said that wisdom first touched him not in his palace, nor among the scrolls of scribes, but beneath these cedars. The night before Gibeon, when the silence around him became so deep it cracked open into music. You hear that music now. It sounds a bit like an old harp dropped into water, a bit like whispered Hebrew across stone. And then something inside the dream lifts. You feel yourself step into it not as an outsider, but as a soul welcomed. You might think you can simply listen and drift off, but unless you've got wings or a direct line to the Almighty, you probably won't survive this kind of divine proximity without being changed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still with me, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself on soft earth beneath the outstretched limbs of Solomon's childhood. The trees here remember every word God has ever spoken. They bend in patterns that mirror the Hebrew alphabet, their roots entwining like psalms. Solomon, still a boy in your mind, comes here to be alone. Not to escape his royal training, but to listen to something greater than human wisdom. You hear what he heard, the drip of dew, the wingbeat of an owl, and in the middle of that something else, the sigh of the spirit, just low enough to require stillness, just high enough to evade ego. Solomon doesn't talk here. He breathes, he waits, he wonders. And then one day, under these very cedars, a strange thing happens. A moth lands on his open palm and does not fly away. It just stays. You watch his face as he stares at it, no fear, just understanding. He whispers something, maybe a proverb not yet born. Later it's said that even the insects listened to him, that he could speak their languages, if not with words, then with understanding. Some say this moment never happened, that it was poetic legend layered onto an already legendary life. Others claim that these woods were part of a sacred geometry, a meeting point between worlds. Whatever the truth, something changed here. Solomon started to dream differently. His dreams became vivid, instructive, like soft blueprints etched in moonlight. They weren't visions of war or women or wealth. They were riddles, holy ones. You see one now? A great golden staircase spiraling into the sky, each step engraved with an unanswered question. Who is wise, says one. What is justice without mercy, asks another. What is silence, made of Solomon, ascends. So do you. You feel no weight, no urgency, only an invitation, a pulse of peace. Theologically, this is where things get interesting. Some ancient mystics argue that wisdom was not a gift Solomon received later in life, but an eternal entity that followed him since birth. A spiritual shadow that matured alongside him, speaking only when the world was quiet enough. Others say it wasn't wisdom at all, but a fragment of the Logos, the divine word that shaped creation, choosing Solomon as its temporary mouthpiece. But tonight the answer isn't the point. The dreaming is, the sacred unknowing. The way your breathing slows as you listen for leaves whispering secrets your mind won't remember, but your soul will. And now you hear a deeper stillness, the kind that makes your body want to melt into the earth. You lie beside Solomon. Neither of you speak, but you feel what he feels, a God too vast to be seen, yet somehow folded into the shape of stillness. You look up. The stars are unusually soft. One of them winks, maybe on purpose, maybe just for you. The soil beneath you fades into warmth, no longer earth, but something softer, almost woven. You are no longer beneath trees. Now you're walking velvet steps, ancient and quiet, toward the high place of Gibeon. Solomon walks ahead of you, not as a king cloaked in power, but as a servant cloaked in questions. The night air hums with distant fires, the smell of sacrifice curling like incense into the stars. Every footstep carries centuries, and every breath feels rehearsed by prophets. This is no ordinary hill. Gibeon is where Solomon came to meet God, not because God lived there, but because Solomon knew silence lives closer to heaven when you're willing to climb for it. You take each step with him now. The world below grows smaller. The voices of the court fade. What remains is this, the pulse of the divine drawing near. At the summit, the altar looms not as a place of death, but of invitation. It flickers with firelight and shadow play, sacred tension in the air. Solomon offers 1,000 burnt offerings, not out of performance but sincerity. He is asking in his way to be heard, not by a crowd, but by the only one who matters. You close your eyes and the world opens, the veil thins. Sleep doesn't take you now, it receives you, gently, deeply. You drift into Solomon's dream, not as a stranger, but as a witness. The fire dims, but a light remains. It does not come from the altar. It comes from nowhere and everywhere at once. A presence folds into the night, weightless, yet overwhelming, soft, yet consuming. And then a voice. Not thunder, not wind, but something in between. Ask what I shall give you, it says. You feel it in your bones. This is the moment, the hinge of everything. The universe, it seems, leans in to listen. Solomon doesn't speak right away. His dream self walks in circles, searching his own soul. You follow closely, watching the flickers of doubt and desire pass over his face. Power, riches, revenge against old enemies, all are within reach, but none satisfy him. Instead, he kneels. There's something beautiful about a king kneeling in his own dream. And then he says it not in grandeur, but in surrender. Give your servant an understanding heart. You feel the world exhale. And then silence again, thick, golden, holy. What exactly is an understanding heart? Scholars still argue. Some say it means discernment, the capacity to separate good from evil. Others say it refers to a heart that hears a spirit so attuned it listens even to what is unsaid. In Hebrew, it's lev shomeah, a heart that hears. Imagine that. Not a heart that controls commands or conquers, but a heart that listens. Even God in this dream seems pleased, maybe even surprised. You watch Solomon's face. He's no longer alone. Heaven hovers close, delighted not by his request, but by what it reveals about him. And then unexpectedly you see something else, a curiosity few ever mention. Another figure walks in the distance, hooded, watching. He never speaks. He carries a scroll but never opens it. Some claim he is the angel of wisdom. Others whisper he's a future echo. Solomon's own conscience returning from his last days to witness his first pure prayer. Whoever he is, he leaves behind something glowing faintly in the dream's soil. A seed. A sigil. You reach toward it, but it dissolves before your fingers can touch. The night stretches onward. The dream shifts. You're walking now through a meadow of sky-colored grass. You and Solomon both. The air is so still it hums. The stars seem closer, some just inches from your head. One even brushes your shoulder like a breeze. You laugh quietly. Solomon glances sideways and smiles, he knows. Dreams like this are rare even for kings. You ask yourself, what would you have asked for? Be honest. Is it a house by the sea, a body healed, a grudge forgiven? Is it peace you want, or the ability to make peace? There's no wrong answer. But perhaps tonight, like Solomon, you choose to listen instead of ask. You sit beside him now. The meadow is soft. The stars continue whispering above you. Somewhere nearby, a lamb lies down with a lion. It's not a metaphor, not tonight. Solomon rests on one elbow, drawing patterns in the sky-colored grass. He hums something old, maybe a song of Moses, maybe something he hasn't written yet. Either way, it feels like it's just for you. And in the distance, the fire at Gibeon never quite goes out. The light shifts. Not abruptly, just enough for you to notice that the stars have rearranged themselves, as if listening changed their positions. You and Solomon rise together, though the meadow fades behind you. In its place, the dream reshapes itself into something more ancient, more mysterious. Now you are nowhere and everywhere. Darkness surrounds you, but not with fear. It's the kind of darkness that cradles thought, that holds the breath of God before he speaks. You are weightless, suspended, waiting, and then it happens, the voice returns. Not with words this time, but with knowing. It doesn't fill your ears. It fills your being. Solomon floats beside you, his face lit by some inner light, and you realize the question has already been asked. What shall I give you? The answer echoes in your spirit, even though it was spoken in the previous section. The dream isn't repeating, it's deepening, like a ripple returning to its center. Now you hear something strange. God is speaking, but he's speaking while Solomon sleeps. Let that settle in. You are witnessing a divine conversation carried out in dreams, where one party slumbers and the other creates worlds with whispers. There's something thrilling about it, like watching an artist paint on water. You see threads now, threads of gold weaving between stars, then spiraling down towards Solomon's body. Each thread hums with a different word: justice, mercy, curiosity, fear, silence. All of them filter through him as he sleeps. You watch his chest rise and fall with their rhythm. This is how wisdom enters, not through books or speeches, but through surrender. And perhaps that's what the ancients always meant when they spoke of fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Not terror, not trembling, but awe, stillness, letting yourself be rewritten by the one who dreams reality into being. Now a subtle shift again. You're back beneath the stars, but higher this time, not on a hill, not even on earth. You're walking on a dream bridge between dimensions. Beneath your feet, mist. Around your shoulders, warmth. Before you, doors. Huge, ancient, sealed with 7 kinds of silence. Solomon approaches the first. A handprint glows in its center, not his, but yours. He turns to you. This one is yours, he says. You hesitate. It's just a dream, right? But something inside you stirs, the same something that knows when truth hides inside parables. You press your palm to the door, and it sighs open like a resting lion. Inside you see it, a throne room with no throne, just a book floating midair. It opens as you approach. Its pages glow with symbols, some Hebrew, some you don't recognize. The ink doesn't stay still. It writhes alive. You look closer. One phrase stands out clear as water. I will speak in dreams and make myself known in visions. That line hums deep in your chest. You remember now, that's from the book of Numbers, God's own words, not shouted from a mountain, not carved in stone, spoken in the gentle folds of slumber. And suddenly, the theological implications spill around you. Why would the God of fire, law, and covenant choose dreams so personal, so unprovable as a means of communication? Some argue dreams are lesser, unreliable, too rooted in emotion. Others claim they are heaven's back door used when the front gates are too noisy. You walk back into the starfield. Solomon is seated now, scribbling something into air, not with a pen, but with thought. Every line he writes blooms into a proverb, then floats away. You recognize some, others you've never heard. One brushes past your ear like a breeze. The listening heart is wiser than the speaking tongue. Not in the Bible, but it feels like it belongs. Then out of nowhere, humor sneaks in. A small cloud floats past, shaped like a camel wearing a crown. Solomon raises an eyebrow. Wisdom's got jokes too, he says. You both chuckle gently. Dreams have room for that kind of holy mischief. And then the scene begins to fade again. But before it does, Solomon turns toward you. There's more, he says. So much more. And just as the dream begins to pull you forward, you hear the softest echo like an afterthought from God. I do nothing without first revealing it in dreams to my servants. You smile. You don't need to remember everything. You just need to be present, like Solomon. Open, listening. The stars flicker. The dream waits. The silence swells again, not empty, but thick with invitation. You're floating still, but now the dream is clearer, more focused, like Solomon's spirit is guiding the shape of it. The stars begin to part, peeling back like curtains. Behind them, a throne, not Solomon's, not even David's, but something older, deeper, made not of wood or gold, but intention. It pulses like a heartbeat, and from it flows a voice unmistakable in its tenderness and authority. Ask what I shall give you. Again, but this time it's not to Solomon. It's to you. For a moment you panic. What do you ask for when the infinite is listening? Riches, health, success, comfort. Or do you, like Solomon, ask for the strange, sacred thing that few desire, an understanding heart? The dream gives you space to decide, no rush, just eternity waiting politely. You turn back toward Solomon. He's standing barefoot in a hall of light, barely more than a silhouette, but radiant. His dream body glows with a gentle calm, like someone who's been held in a divine embrace. You realize this is the moment. The moment. The dream where Solomon asked, not for power, but for perception. Not for conquest, but for clarity. The humility in that choice still ripples through time. You feel it washing over you now, as soft as a lullaby, as heavy as a crown. And in that quiet, God speaks again. Not just to him, not just to you, to all who would dare listen. Because you have asked this thing, you feel the promise hang in the air like incense. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one before you has had, and none after shall equal. There's a pause, and also what you did not ask for. You feel the grin in God's voice. Riches, honor, and long life if you walk in my ways. It's almost playful, as if heaven delights in someone finally asking the right question. You float beside Solomon as the dream solidifies into a royal tent. The canvas shimmers embroidered with golden thread that whispers names of God as it flutters in the wind. Angels unseen but deeply felt circle the structure with silent wings. You both kneel, not in fear, in awe. Then something peculiar happens. A bird lands at the edge of the tent. Not a dove, a hoopoe crowned and watchful. It hops once, then twice, then bows its head towards Solomon. There's a gleam in its eye, almost knowing. Some apocryphal texts say Solomon could speak the languages of animals, that the birds were his messengers, that the hoopoe in particular brought him secrets from Sheba long before the queen ever arrived. Is it true? Scholars disagree. Some argue these stories were meant to exaggerate Solomon's wisdom, giving him near divine control. Others suggest they are metaphors, each bird a different kind of truth fluttering just within reach. Either way, the hoopoe flies off, but not before dropping a single feather made of light. It lands in Solomon's open palm, then disappears. A sign, a confirmation, maybe just a gift. You look around. The dream is changing again. The tent unravels into wind. The stars swirl like paint on water. You and Solomon are standing on a bridge made of memory. You remember things that never happened, not in your life, but in someone's. A child with questions no teacher could answer. A king pacing sleepless at midnight, praying for peace not in the kingdom, but in the mind. A judge torn between mercy and law. A dreamer lying still, trusting that the voice will come again. You are all of these. Solomon is all of these. And so is God in his own way. Then you feel it, a touch on your shoulder. Light, weightless. A presence not physical but personal. As if wisdom itself leaned in to whisper something just for you. You lean your head. You listen. And what you hear isn't a sentence. It's a sensation. Like clarity wrapped in cloud. Like a mystery that doesn't frustrate but soothes. There's a lesson here. Not all truth is meant to be explained. Some is meant to be absorbed. As you drift again through this liminal light, the echo of God's promise lingers. Ask what I shall give you. But perhaps the real secret is this. The question isn't a test. It's a door. Now the dream shifts again, fluid as silken water, and the world you land in feels warmer, quieter. You're standing in the stillness that follows a storm, though no rain has fallen. You look around. A gentle wind moves through olive branches. Somewhere in the distance, a harp string hums once and goes quiet. Solomon sits not on a throne, but a simple stone bench. His hands rest on his knees. His eyes are closed, not from fatigue, but from focus. You watch him breathe, deep, deliberate. He is listening. And in that listening, you understand something the heart he asked for. The understanding heart wasn't just a gift, it was a transformation. You kneel beside him. You try it, slowing your breath, quieting the mental clutter, tuning yourself like an instrument held close to the chest of God. The silence becomes rich, layered. You hear things you didn't notice before, the way the light moves across skin, the rustle of unseen wings, far above the voice of your own thoughts, and something beyond them. This is what Solomon wanted. Not the wisdom to command, but the ability to perceive. To hear not just what people say, but what they mean. To know when to speak and when to let silence speak for you. A gentle breeze brushes your cheek. You open your eyes. The scene around you has changed, though you never saw it shift. Now you're in a great hall. Golden light streams in from narrow windows. The floor beneath your feet is made of patterned stone like the inside of a seashell. On either side of the room, people. 2 women, 1 child, 1 crown. The famous story, But you see it differently now. This isn't about a sword or a verdict, it's about what wisdom does when truth is hidden beneath emotion. One woman is pleading her voice high with urgency, the other stands still, eyes tight guarded. You notice what Solomon notices. Not the words, the tremble behind them, the way one woman's hand moves when the baby cries, the flinch, the pause, the truth that leaks out between syllables. And suddenly the test is no longer about the baby. It's about discernment, heart hearing. You don't even need to see the sword. Solomon doesn't want to use it. That was never the goal. The threat was a mirror. It forced the truth to show itself. And it did. The real mother speaks up not out of logic but love. Give her the child, she cries, only don't kill him. You feel it. That divine moment where emotion becomes clarity, where compassion reveals the path more surely than argument. The child is returned. The court exhales. Solomon looks at you not as a king, but as a friend who's found a fragment of heaven in human form. You wonder how many judgments like this he gave, how many impossible questions crossed his path that required not knowledge but wisdom, not learning but listening. Some scrolls say this was his most famous decision. Others whisper there were many like it, unrecorded, known only in dream and dust. Moments where Solomon judged not from law, but from love sharpened by understanding. And here's something curious. Some scholars argue that Solomon's wisdom wasn't a fixed thing, but an ever-deepening awareness, like the rings of a tree. Every judgment grew him. Every encounter shaped the heart he asked for. Others believe the story itself is a literary device, a parable meant to demonstrate wisdom in action, not history. They point to older versions of similar tales in Egyptian texts. But as you stand here, none of that matters. Because wisdom isn't about certainty. It's about being able to stand in tension and still hear God. And right now, that's exactly where you are. The child cries once, then falls asleep in the mother's arms. One woman leaves in shame, but not anger. Even she seems relieved. The truth has spoken. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forceful. It was just true. Solomon walks past you. He whispers something under his breath. You catch only the last part, a heart that listens. The phrase hangs in the air like perfume. You walk behind him into the next chamber, smaller, darker, a place for private counsel. But the door closes behind you. The dream pauses, and you hear your own heartbeat steady and calm. You've been listening this whole time. Maybe, just maybe, your own heart is learning how to understand. The air thickens, not in weight, but in depth. The dream draws you downward now, into a chamber with no doors, no windows, and yet it feels open, infinite. This is not the public throne room where history records its stories. No, this is deeper, hidden. This is where Solomon judged in silence before the world knew his name. There are no scribes here, no royal robes, no trumpets announcing his arrival, just stone walls and a single table between two men. You realize you're witnessing something unrecorded, an early case, quiet, private. A moment of justice not meant for scrolls, but for heaven's eyes. Two men stand before the young king. One clutches a staff. The other holds nothing, but his face bears the urgency of the wrongly accused. They speak softly with glances more than words. One says the field was his. The other says it was stolen. A line of stones was moved. A covenant was broken. Solomon doesn't interrupt. He listens, not just to the facts, but to the rhythm behind them. You observe his face. He nods occasionally, but says little. He closes his eyes and the room stills. And then he asks a question neither man expects. What kind of tree grows at the edge of this field? They both pause. The one with the staff blinks, then says, an olive. The other shakes his head. No, a fig. Solomon smiles gently. The truth has slipped through. You feel it too. He doesn't accuse, he doesn't shout. He simply leans back, folds his hands, and lets silence convict. The one who lied lowers his gaze. No guards rush in. No punishment is declared. The real justice has already occurred in the exposure of dishonesty and in the quiet victory of truth. And here lies something important. Not every act of wisdom is recorded in marble and song. Some are tucked away, like this one soft verdicts in secret rooms where the only applause comes from angels. You walk with Solomon afterward. He says nothing at first, then almost as a sigh. Wisdom must grow in the dark before it shines in the light. You look back at the room. It's already fading, erasing itself from memory. Not because it doesn't matter, but because wisdom at its best leaves no scars. Outside, the world is waking. You hear bells in the distance, birds beginning their first chirps of day. But here in the dream night still reigns, not in shadow but in peace. A gentle reminder not all justice is dramatic. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is the one no one sees. Some scholars argue stories like this existed but were never canonized, that Solomon's private life contained thousands of similar acts, so many that they filled volumes now lost to time. The book of the Acts of Solomon mentioned in Kings is gone, but whispers remain, legends, footprints in dreams. Others believe these accounts are woven into the fabric of Midrash, and folklore passed from tongue to tongue like sacred lullabies. Not to be proven, but to be honored. And here's something curious you notice as the dream continues to drift. You can feel yourself relaxing more than you have in days. This isn't just storytelling, it's something deeper. Some kind of spiritual massage that reaches into your anxieties and smooths them out like creases in linen. The more you walk in Solomon's dreams, the more your thoughts stop clenching. The more your mind quiets down. And isn't that wisdom too, knowing when to let go of noise? Solomon pauses beneath a fig tree, now one hand resting on its trunk. You realize he's not speaking to you, but you're hearing his thoughts. They're not in words, they're in feeling. Discernment is not about deciding who is wrong. It's about finding what is true. You repeat it in your mind slowly, like a mantra, like a prayer. Somewhere far above the stars twinkle. And for the first time in what feels like forever, your body feels weightless, soft, safe. You lie down under the fig tree beside Solomon, not to sleep, but to listen more deeply. The understanding heart, it seems, begins with quiet. The air shifts again, so subtle it's almost a thought instead of a breeze. When you open your eyes, you're no longer beneath the fig tree. You're standing in the shadows of columns, tall and watchful, their stone faces carved with symbols older than alphabets. You recognize the place. This is the hall where Solomon made his most famous judgment. But that moment has passed. Now the room is quiet. The child has been returned. The sword is back in its sheath. The crowd has gone home. Only the echoes remain. And you. You walk slowly past the pillars, their bases cool and smooth underfoot. Each one holds a memory, though none speak it aloud. You pause at the center of the room where the sword had once been lifted. You notice something odd. There's no blood here. Of course not. The child was never harmed. But still it's strange. The story is famous for a threat that never happened. You close your eyes and see it again. The two mothers, the dispute, the cry of the real mother when the sword was raised. But this time the dream shows you something else, a layer beneath the words. The sword wasn't the answer, it was the question. Would love speak louder than fear? It did. And now in this silence you understand what Solomon saw sometimes. Justice wears the mask of danger only to reveal mercy when truth emerges. You run your hand along the invisible edge of where the blade had hovered. It's not steel you feel, it's tension, the sharp line between revelation and ruin. And here's something curious. Some ancient writers believed this judgment wasn't just clever. They saw it as divinely inspired. That Solomon wasn't bluffing but channeling something higher. That the threat of splitting the child came from a place beyond strategy, a test designed by heaven itself to reveal maternal truth through instinct. But others disagree. Some scholars argue it's a tale designed to impress, to establish Solomon's authority in the early days of his reign. A political parable packaged in drama. Yet as you stand here now, those arguments feel thin. Because wisdom, real wisdom, isn't about being right. It's about revealing what's real. And that's what Solomon did. The sword was never meant to fall. It was meant to show which heart would break first. And that's what wisdom often does, isn't it? It listens until the pain speaks louder than the lies. You step away from the judgment hall. The pillars shift around you subtly like they've been watching. Approving. A breeze passes through the open archway, carrying something sweet sandalwood myrrh and something harder to name. You follow it. Now the dream carries you through stone corridors that soften as you walk. Gold veins thread through the walls. A gentle glow pulses from the floor like the heart of the temple itself is breathing. You arrive in a smaller chamber, more intimate. This is not for public display. This is where Solomon goes to replay the judgments in his mind. You see him seated at a low table, staring at a single oil lamp. He turns to you and gestures wordlessly for you to sit. You do. For a moment, you both just listen to the flame. Then Solomon speaks not with pride, but reflection. People think the sword was the point, he says. But the sword was the mirror. It showed what the heart could not say. He leans back. Wisdom is not knowing what to do. It's knowing what must be revealed before anyone does anything at all. His words settle into the silence like warm stones into water. He closes his eyes. You do too. And suddenly you're not in the chamber anymore. You're drifting again through memories that aren't yours but feel familiar. A woman holding her child tighter than logic. A judge weighing silence more heavily than shouting. A king who listens more than he speaks. You remember them all now not just as stories, but as part of your own soul's vocabulary. The wisdom isn't just Solomon's anymore. It's gently threading itself into you. And just before the dream shifts again, you hear something almost like laughter. Not mocking, warm, playful. The kind of laughter truth makes when it's finally understood. You smile without meaning to. Even swords can be gentle when wielded by wisdom. The light fades from golden to blue like the sky just before dawn. But you're not outside. You're inside something massive, quiet, and alive. You feel it before you see it, an echo in the bones of the place, like breath moving through stone. This is not the temple Solomon built. This is the temple he dreamed. Long before the gold was smelted, before cedar was shipped from Tyre, before a single blueprint was drawn, the temple existed inside him. Shimmering, internal, a holy architecture unfolding in silence. You step into it now, this inner sanctuary, and you realize it's not a building. It's a memory of heaven. Solomon walks beside you. He runs his hand along invisible walls, walls made of intention, not brick. As he moves, they light up softly like glass warmed by sunlight. He looks at you, calm, distant, not needing to speak. The silence here is not empty, it's full. Every step you take is like walking deeper into God's mind. The ceiling, if it can be called that, is a sky turned inward. It pulses with constellations that seem familiar yet rearranged. They flicker not with fire but with revelation. Here the temple is not about rituals, it is about resonance. You reach a chamber shaped like a heart, literally. Rounded, pulsing, gently surrounded by 12 columns, each carved with a different name of God. Some you recognize, others lost to time. At the center is not an altar, it's a mirror. But when you look into it, you don't see yourself. You see who you are when you're listening. And isn't that the entire point of a temple? Not a place to perform, but a place to be undone? Solomon sits across from you, his reflection in the mirror too, but younger. You blink, and he's a child. Blink again, he's old. One more time, and he's both. The temple flexes around his shifting age, not disturbed by it. This is a holy place, beyond time. Some scholars have long speculated that Solomon had a private prayer chamber, apart from the physical temple, a sanctuary where he communed directly with the divine. Lost to history, perhaps never even real. Others say it's metaphorical, a place in his soul where the spirit dwelled. But tonight you see it. It's real. You're inside it. You place your hand on the mirror and the surface ripples, not with your reflection, but with something more mysterious. You see a vision of Solomon kneeling not before an ark, but before a question, a living one. What is wisdom when the world is broken? What is understanding when answers hurt more than silence? He whispers something. You lean in to hear. It's not Hebrew, not a language at all. It's recognition. The mirror pulses once more, and suddenly you're back at the edges of the dream temple, watching as the structure builds itself upward. Beams rise from thought. Walls stretch from breath. And the roof, if it can be called that, forms from layered song. This is what Solomon held inside him long before the temple was made manifest in Jerusalem. It was not an idea, it was a calling. One that began not with blueprints, but with stillness. A structure made not to impress, but to invite. You feel that same invitation now, to build a temple inside yourself. Not of rules, but of reverence. Not of marble, but of meaning. The structure around you fades softly like a dream you're waking from. But not completely. A single piece remains a doorframe with no door floating in space. As you step through it, you realize you've changed. You haven't learned something new. You've unlearned the noise that kept you from what was already true. The temple never needed to be built. It needed to be heard. And Solomon, he was never just a builder. He was a listener in stone. You step through the doorframe and find yourself in a hall unlike any you've seen. The floor is alabaster, but it doesn't echo. The walls are gold, but not flashy. They shimmer like memory. You look ahead and there it is, the throne. Solomon's throne. Not imagined, not legendary, but here whole and waiting. It rises higher than any chair has reason to 6 steps leading up, each guarded by pairs of lions carved in ivory and overlaid with gold. They don't roar, they watch, still but not idle. Their eyes glow faintly, as though aware that they stand not in a palace but in a dream shaped by wisdom itself. You ascend with Solomon. He takes the steps slowly, not as a king basking in grandeur, but as a man remembering what each step cost him. You follow behind him carefully. The lions don't blink. You can't shake the feeling that they're not carved at all. When you reach the top, the view opens. It's not a kingdom you see. It's not land or cities or treasure. It's people. Thousands. Countless. All looking to the throne not for orders, but for clarity. For the invisible light of discernment. Solomon doesn't wave. He doesn't speak. He just sits. The chair seems to breathe beneath him. And you realize this isn't a seat of power. It's a seat of weight. The throne bears not Solomon, but all he must carry. You glance at the lions again. They're symbolic, yes, but also something else. Some ancient texts suggest Solomon's throne was enchanted. That when he stepped on each stair, the lions moved, bowed, raised paws, even offered support. Others say the throne judged on its own glowing when lies were spoken near it. Most scholars dismiss this as myth. But as you stand here in the dream, you begin to wonder, because one of the lions turns to look at you, just for a moment. And in its gaze, you see something that makes your heart slow. Not power, not intimidation, but invitation. You've been climbing steps your whole life. Maybe not literal ones, but decisions, burdens, questions. And each one has required a kind of wisdom no one else could hand you. You place a hand on the arm of the throne. It pulses faintly warm like sunlight filtered through time. Solomon speaks finally. The lions guard more than the throne, he says. They guard the silence beneath judgment, the part no one sees. He pauses. Before I speak, I listen there. You nod. It makes sense. Because the deeper truth is that wisdom doesn't begin on the throne. It begins on the steps, each one forcing the soul to bow a little lower even as the body rises higher. And here's something odd, almost playful. As you look down at your own feet, you realize the steps beneath you are changing, each one labeled in golden script. Kindness, restraint, humility, curiosity, patience, courage. You wonder which ones you've climbed in your own life, and which ones still wait ahead. The dream holds you there for a while, not frozen, just still. And in that stillness, something forms beside the throne, a breeze shaped like a figure. Not human, not animal, just presence. An angel, perhaps. It leans close to Solomon and whispers. No one else seems to hear it, but he does. He nods slowly, then turns to you. Wisdom, he says softly, is knowing which voice to believe when only one is audible. You let that sink in. Then as gently as wind through linen, the lions blink just once. Solomon stands. You descend together, leaving the throne behind, but the weight of it lingers, not as a burden, as a responsibility, and somehow you're ready for it, even if all you carry tonight is peace. The dream shifts downward, as though the throne hall itself has exhaled. You and Solomon walk in silence now, deeper into a corridor where sunlight fades and firelight begins. The walls change from polished stone to burnished bronze, warm to the touch and humming faintly like strings beneath the fingers of time. You smell metal and sea salt. You're approaching Hiram's bronze. You turn a corner and step into a wide courtyard filled with massive vessels, columns, and shimmering tools, all cast in bronze, all glowing softly, as if just poured. The great molten sea sits in the center, calm now, but holding the echo of fire. Solomon watches it with quiet reverence. This, he says, was the part no one could explain. You look around at the gleaming artistry, the molten sea on 12 bulls, the basins, the altar tools. All shaped by Hiram of Tyre, the master craftsman summoned by Solomon. A man with no equal in metalwork, half Israelite, half foreign, which itself was a quiet mystery. Hiram's bronze wasn't just functional, it sang. Every piece carried a resonance, like each one remembered the shape of God's voice. Solomon walks toward one basin, runs his hand across it, and smiles. He didn't ask for measurements, he says he asked what the Spirit wanted. That wasn't recorded in Scripture, but tonight the dream lets you hear it, a memory hidden between verses. You see a younger Hiram standing beside Solomon, listening to a breeze neither of them could explain. His hands moved as if led by invisible blueprints, lines of fire and breath. Each item had a purpose, but each also had a hidden meaning. Take the two massive pillars, Jachin and Boaz. You step toward them now, tall, towering, eternal. They stand guard before you, carved with pomegranates and lilies. Decorative, symbolic, both. Jachin means he establishes. Boaz means in him is strength. Together they create a sentence: he will establish strength, But some ancient rabbis whispered another interpretation, that Jachin was the voice of promise, and Boaz, the echo of fulfillment. One to begin, one to uphold. Others believe the pillars stood not for strength, but for mercy and justice, the two legs of divine wisdom. There's even a rare tradition that they were hollow with sacred scrolls hidden inside. Solomon places a hand on Jachin, and the bronze sings a low, resonant hum that vibrates through your chest. He closes his eyes. You hear it too. It's not music, it's a memory. A story you don't remember learning but feel you've always known. You walk slowly between the pillars. As you pass, the dream feels different, lighter but deeper. As if Boaz and Jachin mark not just the entrance to the temple, but the threshold between mind and spirit. Solomon speaks again. These were not decorations, he says. They were anchors, between heaven and earth, between what we build and what we cannot hold. You touch the base of Boaz. It's cool now, but you sense the heat it once held. Here's the quiet truth Solomon offers you tonight. Even the objects around us, stones, metal tools, can carry traces of the holy. When made in reverence, they become more than things. They become vessels. Not for worship, but for wonder. You move toward the great basin, the molten sea. It's still yet impossibly deep. You see your reflection, but not as you are. You see yourself when you understand. When your voice quiets and your listening heart emerges. For a moment you feel like diving in, but Solomon stops you. Not yet, he smiles. Wisdom doesn't always arrive in fire. Sometimes it waits in silence, in bronze, in breath. You take one last look at the courtyard, the burnished gleam of tools that once touched the temple's first stones. The pomegranates, the lions, the layered meanings waiting like seeds beneath each surface. And you realize something small but profound. Solomon's wisdom didn't come fully formed. It grew, with every stone laid, with every craftsman's prayer, with every bronze basin that rang with unseen music. The dream begins to shift again, but the scent of metal and olive oil lingers. And in your hands, a small bronze pomegranate, warm, silent. Yours. The dream changes with a softness that feels like breath exhaled into fog. The bronze glow fades, replaced by the cooler hush of twilight stone. You walk alongside Solomon beneath two looming structures, pillars again, yes, but now they feel even taller, more alive. You've seen them before, Jachin and Boaz. But this time they're not standing at the temple gates. They rise within your dream like ancient trees' roots sunk deep into the soil of creation. You look up and the tops vanish into stars. Solomon walks between them once more. He looks smaller now, not diminished, but humbled. As though he understands that no matter how wise, he will never fully comprehend what these pillars hold. These were my first sentinels, he says gently. They knew things I didn't. You follow him through, and again you feel it, a passing through something somewhere that doesn't obey the laws of space. Jachin hums with purpose. Boaz pulses with stillness. Together they form a doorway, not into a building, but into an awareness. You pause. What were these pillars really? Decorative columns, esoteric code, guardians of a hidden dimension. Some scholars believe they represented the balance of masculine and feminine energy. Others argue they symbolized the two major forces in God's governance, establishment, and might. Some mystics go further, saying they were actual spiritual conduits, capable of conducting prayers upward and divine insight downward. Still others whisper a rarer theory that Jachin and Boaz were not made by human hands at all. That Hiram cast them, yes, but the forms were dictated by something higher. Dream instructions, visions, or something even older. Tonight the dream lets you decide. Because as you walk between them, the sensation isn't awe, it's alignment. Something in your own soul straightens, a feeling like your spine was crooked in some subtle spiritual way and is now quietly being set back in place. Solomon watches you with a look you haven't seen before. Not teacher, not king, brother. He says, I used to ask the pillars questions. You tilt your head. What did they answer? He smiles faintly. They didn't answer. They remembered. You don't understand at first. Then you look at Boaz. A flicker of light moves across its surface, not carved but flowing like memory through stone. You see flashes. Solomon as a boy, hand pressed to the bronze, whispering prayers no one else heard. His lips moving, his eyes closed, a single tear down one cheek. Then you see it, older Solomon, hand still there. The same prayer, but this time the tear is gone. Not from lack of feeling, from understanding. You place your hand there now where his was. And for a moment the pillar feels warm. And you hear no feel a phrase gently pressing itself into your heart. Some truths are not spoken, they are stood beside. You step back, Yakin pulses once almost approving. And now you begin to grasp something. Solomon didn't just build these, he built around them. Everything else, the temple, the throne, the courtyard, was laid in relation to these two. They were not decoration. They were orientation, markers in a universe too fluid to hold still. And that might be the secret. Sometimes wisdom doesn't point the way. It becomes the way. Solomon walks forward again and you follow. The pillars begin to dissolve behind you, not vanish, just fade like dream things do when their work is done. But the feeling they leave in you, solid. Like stone in your chest, humming with peace. And just as the stars return overhead, you hear a voice, not God's, not Solomon's. Yours, inside your mind. He establishes, and in him is strength. The sentence completes itself as if your soul has always known it. You take a breath, and the dream flows on. The world tilts, but not in dizziness, more like wonder. You find yourself drifting upward now into a dream that feels older than even Solomon. Older than the temple, older than time. And yet you recognize it. It's not a place. It's a voice, a woman's voice. Soft laughing layered with wisdom, so ancient it feels like music that existed before ears were made to hear it. She's not speaking words exactly, she's weaving them. Her breath is poetry, her movement the logic of stars. Solomon is beside you again, quiet reverent. She was there before me, he whispers. You both turn and there she stands, wisdom personified. Lady Wisdom. She moves through the air like incense clothed in light that flickers between dawn and fire. She carries nothing yet. Everything in the dream bends subtly toward her. A tree leans. A breeze stills. The stars blink slower, as if pausing to listen. She does not ask for attention. She already has it. In Proverbs, Solomon once wrote of her, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work. Before the mountains were shaped, before the depths had foundations, I was there." And now you see her exactly as he must have once dreamed her, not just an idea, not just a metaphor, but presence. The first witness of creation. The quiet architect beside God before light was spoken. She smiles at you, not sweetly, not gently, but knowingly, like she already knows the questions you haven't admitted you're asking. She reaches into the sky and plucks a star like it's a fruit. She hands it to Solomon, who passes it to you. It's warm, but not hot. You turn it in your hands. Inside, you see a swirling pattern, scripture maybe, or something older. Lady Wisdom says nothing. She just waits. And that waiting says more than words could. You feel the weight of the star in your palm. It's light, but significant. Like truth you haven't earned, but have been entrusted with anyway. Solomon kneels. You do too. The space around you bends into a library without walls, scrolls unfurling in the air like wings. None of them make noise, yet all of them speak. Wisdom walks among them, not reading but remembering. Her fingers trail the air like a harpist brushing past notes she's already played. And here's something strange. Not all the scrolls are canon. You spot titles that never made it into the known Bible, the Book of Jubilees. The wisdom of Ben Sira, fragments of Enoch's visions. You look to Solomon. He nods. I read them in dreams, he says. Some came like whispers, others like thunder. But he glances toward wisdom. She never raised her voice. You take that in slowly. Sometimes truth doesn't shout. It stands nearby until you notice it. Some scholars have long debated whether Lady Wisdom in Proverbs is a literary device or a veiled glimpse of the divine feminine, God's creative impulse in personal form. Some go further, calling her a prefiguration of the Holy Spirit or even the Logos. Others caution against anthropomorphizing abstract ideas. But as you stand here now, it doesn't feel abstract. It feels familiar, not distant like dogma, near like breath when you finally rest. Lady Wisdom walks past once more, and as she does, the scrolls begin to return to their resting places in the wind. She turns to you just for a moment and speaks not with voice, but with memory. Seek me early and you will find me. The words don't echo. They settle. Inside your chest. Inside your spine. Inside your sleep. Solomon rises. She'll visit again, he says. She never stays long. She prefers those who notice her without noise. And just like that, she is gone. But her presence lingers. In your hands, the star begins to fade, not vanish, just return to wherever stars go when they've said what they came to say. And as you walk away, you feel wiser. Not because you've learned, because you've listened. The dream begins to shift again, but this time, not with grandeur. It softens. You feel the texture of it change like velvet soaked in sunlight. The air warms. The breeze sweetens. And then the scent. Lilies. Fresh, delicate, the kind that bloom in secret in gardens no one tends but angels. You follow the fragrance. Solomon is no longer beside you as a king or a judge. He's barefoot robes, loosened hair, unbound. He smiles not wisely, but wistfully. Ahead, you see rolling hills clothed in wildflowers, vineyards climbing the slopes like a psalm in bloom. This is the world of the Song of Songs. A place of longing, of love, of spirit meeting flesh not in lust but in lyric. You walk through rows of blossoms, each step hums. Bees drift lazily, the sun never blinding. The atmosphere isn't passion, it's poetry. You feel yourself soften, not just in body, but in soul. And there she is, the Shulamite. Mysterious barefoot eyes like midnight wells. She doesn't look at you. She looks beyond you toward Solomon. Her voice floats through the field like silk on water. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. You blink. Did she speak aloud? Or is her voice just there embedded in the lilies? Solomon walks toward her. He is not majestic. He is vulnerable. And so is she. They circle each other not like dancers, but like question and answer. Some scholars call this book an allegory for God and Israel. Others say it's Solomon's youthful journal of love, raw and real. Mystics see it as the spirit longing for union with the divine. And tonight you realize it can be all of these. Because the language of desire, when purified by wonder, becomes a hymn. Solomon reaches for her hand, and the scene dissolves not in shame, not in finality, but in transcendence. You find yourself in a grove of apple trees now. The sun filters through branches in quiet beams. The woman speaks again softly, like a memory returning. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. The words settle into the leaves like dew. And you remember something else he once wrote. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Love, not conquest. Not judgment, love. The great mystery Solomon couldn't define, only chase. And in that chasing he touched something holy. Even now the dream blushes with it. Theological debate has long tried to pin down this song. Is it erotic devotional? Did Solomon write all of it? Or is it a collection? Is the Shulamite real or a metaphor for the soul's ache? You're standing inside the question now, and the answer doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like breath. The Shulamite passes beside you. She doesn't speak, but her eyes say everything. That to seek God is to long for something beautiful. That to love well is to know something sacred. That Solomon's greatest wisdom may not have been in judgment, but in tenderness. You walk beside a low wall of stone. Vines spill over the edge. A fox darts by, small, silent, unbothered. The Shulamite once warned of foxes that spoil the vines, but this one only watches you, then vanishes into mist. And somewhere in the distance a voice sings, Awake, O north wind, and come south wind, blow upon my garden. You lie down in the lilies, your head resting on Solomon's imagined scroll. The dream feels soft again, less lesson, more lullaby. And the song continues not in words, but in wind. You close your eyes. And for the first time tonight, you understand what it means to be loved by God, not as a servant, but as a soul. The lilies dissolve into darkness, not harsh, but thick and velvety like twilight pulling up a blanket over a sleeping field. The air cools. The scent of wine and wildflowers fades into something older, sharper, ominous. You are no longer in Solomon's garden of longing. You're in a chamber of silence. Stone walls, iron torches that do not burn, shadows that move just slightly when you're not looking. And Solomon stands at the center, no longer barefoot and glowing, but cloaked tense. He holds something in his right hand, a ring. Thick, etched, glinting faintly in the dreamlight. The seal of Solomon. You've heard the stories, maybe even dismissed them. That he commanded spirits, that demons feared him, that he wore a ring given by heaven or by something else that granted him control over the invisible. Tonight the dream doesn't ask you to believe. It just asks you to witness. A shape forms at the edge of the chamber, not solid, smoke or shadow. You don't feel fear exactly, but your spine knows this isn't friendly. Solomon raises the ring. His eyes glow faintly. The shape stops. It doesn't speak. But the tension in the room curls like incense turning into a knot. You hear a name whispered, not in your language, maybe not in any. The shape kneels, and just like that it's gone. Solomon lowers the ring. He breathes, and so do you. You weren't supposed to see that, he says quietly, but you did. And now the dream allows you to see why. In the apocryphal Testament of Solomon, there are accounts of him binding demons with this ring given to him by an angel sent from God. Using it, he forced them to help build the temple. Some of them confessed their weaknesses, some begged, some lied. It sounds fantastical, maybe even unworthy of a biblical king. But the deeper current isn't about demons. It's about commanding your chaos. Solomon didn't summon these beings for sport. He faced them because they were already there, inside the world, inside himself. And perhaps inside us. You glance again at the ring. Solomon's fingers close over it. He says this was never power. This was containment, a boundary. You nod. Because the wisest people aren't those who reject the darkness. They are those who know where it lives, and how to name it. A new chamber unfolds beside this one, taller, ringed with symbols etched in gold. You walk with Solomon through its shadows. Torches flare to life one by one. The walls hum with stories, warnings, riddles in ancient tongues. And then written in fire above a doorway, "Know thy dominion, or it will know thee." You pause beneath it. That phrase could mean many things. To some, it's a reminder of leadership, the call to govern well. To others, it's a warning. Unacknowledged urges, fears, and griefs will rule you from the shadows unless you bring them into the light. Solomon touches the inscription. The flames extinguish. You walk through. Now you're outside again, standing beneath stars that pulse like slow heartbeats. A figure watches from the distance, not threatening, not quite human. Maybe a dream of one of those ancient spirits. Maybe just your own reflection wearing someone else's form. Whatever it is, it bows and walks away. You feel no danger, only awareness. And a strange peace that comes from facing something difficult and not turning away. Solomon says nothing more. He no longer needs to. You've seen a part of him most never do. The part that stares into the dark and speaks its true name. The part that wears the ring not for conquest, but to remember that even wisdom has shadows and still chooses the light. You wake into another layer of the dream. This one shimmers, polished and precise like ivory under glass. You're standing at the foot of a staircase, its edges glowing faintly in the quiet light of dawn. At the top, Solomon's throne of glass and ivory. It's more beautiful than you expected, but not in a glittering, showy way. It radiates a quiet authority. The kind of beauty born from structure, from symmetry, from weight that is both seen and unseen. Solomon stands before it, not seated yet. He's older now, wiser, yes, but wearier too. His eyes scan the throne the way a sailor scans the horizon, measuring something no one else can see. The lions are here again, not like before. These ones move. Their tails curl slowly, their paws flex. Their golden eyes blink with ancient rhythm. They do not growl, they do not speak, but they understand. So does Solomon. "This throne never let me lie," he murmurs. You both walk closer. Each step up the staircase is bordered by more lions, 6 steps, 12, lions 6 on each side. They're mirrored perfectly, yet none are identical. Each one carries a slight difference, a raised claw, a turned head, a carved word in a different script. At the 7th step, the seat itself rises, broad carved from ivory, overlaid with gold and inlaid with crystal that catches light like water remembers fire. You look closely. There are etchings in the armrests too fine to read until you sit. And Solomon does just that, slowly, with the care of someone who's carried too much for too long. The lions blink in unison. And the throne breathes. Not literally, but the dream shows you what Solomon always suspected, that the throne was more than a chair. It was a listener, a judge of the judge. Some traditions claim it could move, that it lifted the king into place, that it refused those with impure hearts. Others say it could speak not aloud, but into the mind, confirming or questioning each royal decree. Solomon never confirmed it, but he never denied it either. He leans back now and you stand beside him. He gestures toward the far wall there, where windows stretch from floor to sky. Through them you don't see the city. You see people, thousands. Their faces don't move. They don't chant or praise. They watch, not for performance. For peace? That's what this throne means, you realize. It's not a monument to power. It's a promise that every person under Solomon's reign, every child, every widow, every stranger, could look toward this chair and believe that someone was listening. Solomon looks tired, not broken, just human. He reaches out and the throne responds. A faint hum pulses under your feet. It's like the dream is asking a question. If you had to judge the world, could you begin with stillness? You don't answer, you just listen. Some scholars argue the throne is myth. No ivory and gold structure could survive time. Others think the biblical description is poetic, a metaphor for divine responsibility. And maybe it is. But tonight the throne exists, because wisdom needs a seat, and a weight to anchor it. Solomon closes his eyes. For a moment he is utterly still. You look again at the lions. They are not guarding him. They are watching you, not as a threat, as a mirror. You step forward, place your hand on the throne's edge. It's cool, but warming. A single thought enters your mind. Quiet, true. All who judge must first kneel to truth. You don't speak it. You feel it. And somehow it's enough. Solomon rises. The lions still. And the dream layered, balanced, and shining lets go just a little. You descend the steps back toward the waiting hush of the unseen crowd. And though you don't turn to look again, you know, the throne still watches. Not with eyes, with understanding. The dream softens again, becoming feather-light, fragrant with citrus and sandalwood. You're walking now through a garden that feels both ancient and enchanted. No longer the garden of lovers or lilies, but something stranger. You hear a flutter, then a chirp, then words. You pause beneath a tree heavy with fruit, and suddenly a flock of birds sweeps overhead, not just flying, but speaking. Not in English, not Hebrew, not human language at all. But you understand them. Somehow. Solomon chuckles beside you, already expecting your surprise. They talk, he says, simply as if it's obvious. When someone listens the right way. You look up. The birds circle once more. Swallows, hoopoes, starlings, doves. They perch in the branches like scribes on break. One lands near you, a raven, iridescent and intelligent. It hops once and lets out a low, melodic caw that sounds almost like a question. Solomon nods toward it. This one likes riddles. And suddenly you're back in a memory. A younger Solomon, perhaps 16, standing in a courtyard of the palace, listening to the birds as if they were tutors. You see it in his eyes, not arrogance, but hunger, a desire to hear everything God has placed into the world, even in feathers and claws. It's said in Midrash and Arabic folklore that Solomon understood the speech of birds, that they delivered him secrets, warnings, and even praise. Some say the hoopoe was his favorite, the one that convinced the Queen of Sheba to visit. Others believe birds brought him messages from angels translated into chirps and caws for the ears of the wise. You reach out your hand, and the raven hops onto your wrist. It's not heavy, just present. It bows once, then opens its beak, and from it comes not a squawk, but a line of verse. The wind knows what the scroll forgets. The sky carries what no throne protects. You blink. Did that just happen? Solomon just smiles. They don't always make sense, he says, until they do. You hear another song, this time from a pair of doves in a fig tree. Their cooing overlaps, forming a rhythm that feels like scripture, yet you can't place it. Maybe it was never written. Maybe it was only ever sung. You lie on the soft ground, looking up at branches heavy with fruit and feathers. The birds continue to murmur, and you let their sounds wash over you. Somewhere between the chirps and rustling wings, a soft voice echoes, not external, but internal. Everything in creation has a voice. The wise are those who stop interrupting. You take that in like a deep breath. Solomon sits cross-legged beside you, now watching a bluebird dive through leaves. I asked for wisdom, he says, and the first answer I ever got came from a wren. You glance over. He's not joking. He's not even smiling. He's remembering. You see now that his wisdom wasn't just built from scripture and royal decisions. It was built from observation, from birdsong, from rivers, from shadows, from the quiet places other kings never bothered to notice. And that's the difference. He didn't demand understanding. He received it, even from small creatures with tiny hearts and sharper eyes. One last bird arrives, a hoopoe, just as the legends say. It lands beside Solomon, nods once, and drops a single feather at his feet. Not gold, not magical, just a feather. But he picks it up like it's the end of a prayer. The hoopoe flutters upward, then vanishes in a blink. You reach down and take the feather too. It's light as breath and darker than ink. And somehow it makes you feel seen, because the birds like God are always watching, even when you forget to listen. A warm wind rises, fragrant with cinnamon and myrrh. The dream sways gently like a curtain stirred by divine curiosity. You are no longer in the garden of birds. Now you stand at the gates of Jerusalem. A caravan approaches. Dust kicks softly beneath golden wheels. Camels carry crates of incense, silk, ivory, and something more mysterious questions. And at the center of it all, riding beneath a canopy laced with symbols both familiar and foreign, the Queen of Sheba. Her presence is a hush before thunder. Not because she is loud, but because she doesn't need to be. Every movement she makes seems considered, measured, and not just regal. Spiritual. She dismounts and her eyes meet Solomon's. There's no bow, no flourish, just a long silence. And in that silence, more is exchanged than most treaties ever contain. Solomon walks forward, clothed in humility, not opulence. He recognizes her not as a rival or novelty, but as an equal. She came to test me, he says quietly, not to her, but to you. But the real test was mine. The queen steps forward, her voice like desert thunder, low, precise, warm. They told me of your wisdom, but they did not tell me it would look like stillness. She smiles. You understand now she didn't journey to admire. She came to probe, to see if the God behind Solomon was worthy of trust. Her kingdom worshipped the sun, but something deeper had stirred her heart, something unnamed like a pull from beyond the stars. Scripture tells us she asked hard questions. Tonight, the dream lets you hear one. What is the weight of truth if it cannot be carried with joy? Solomon considers. He does not rush, and then answers not with a lecture but a story. He tells of a farmer who searched for gold beneath his vineyard only to uncover a spring. At first disappointed, he cursed the water, but when drought came, that spring saved his entire village. You searched for gold, Solomon tells her, but you will return with water. She does not smile. She nods. And suddenly you realize she knew the answers all along. She just wanted to see how he would speak them. Some traditions say she converted to Solomon's faith. Others claim she returned to her land unchanged. Some apocryphal tales even whisper of a child born from their union lineages that stretch into distant kingdoms and later legends. But none of that matters here. Because the dream shows what the scrolls do not, that the queen and Solomon were not lovers nor combatants. They were mirrors. And mirrors do not compete. They reveal. Solomon invites her into the palace, not through the golden gates, but through the quieter garden entrance. You follow behind them, watching their robes brush through grass blessed by morning dew. He leads her not to the throne, but to the library. You see scrolls she's never seen before. She touches each one with reverence, and then curiously she pulls a small scroll from her own satchel and places it on the shelf. No words are exchanged, but something sacred just occurred. A gift, a recognition. You ask Solomon later what it said. He just says, "It wasn't for me. It was for whoever would dream this later." A pause. And then he looks at you. Maybe it was meant for now. You walk again beside him as the queen prepares to leave. She mounts her camel. Her gaze is heavy, not with sadness, but fullness. She came for answers. She found understanding. And as the caravan disappears into golden dust, Solomon exhales. She saw, he says almost in wonder, she saw. The sun rises a little higher. The dream quiets. And in that quiet, you realize something simple and profound. True wisdom welcomes questions, because it fears nothing that is real. The dream dims. Gone are the warm colors of conversation and curiosity. You stand now in the shadow of stone on a rooftop, bathed in moonlight, too pale to comfort. Solomon is here, but different. He walks slowly, hands clasped behind his back, crownless, and he looks up, at nothing, or maybe at something he wishes he didn't see. You follow his gaze. Down below, the city sleeps wrapped in silence, but he's not looking at the city. His eyes linger on a single courtyard bathed in torchlight. A woman stands there, veiled in silver, unaware, or perhaps entirely aware that she is being watched. You feel it, that delicate tipping point, the moment before descent. Solomon whispers almost to himself, "This is where my gaze stayed too long." The woman doesn't move. She seems frozen in the dream part of it, but untouchable. You recognize what's happening, not in scandal, but in sorrow. This is not Solomon the judge, not Solomon the builder. This is the man who forgot himself, not in violence, not even in action, in attention, and attention unchecked is a kind of worship. He sighs. You can know everything he says and still forget what you are. Some say Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, that his heart was turned from God by foreign alliances, idolatry, temptation. But here in the dream, the numbers don't matter. Only the glance does. It's not about lust. It's about drift. A slow unraveling of devotion, not from sin, but from subtle substitution. Looking outward when he should have looked inward. You feel the ache in him, not guilt, regret. Like someone remembering the first crack in a temple wall long before it collapsed. And then the dream shifts. You're in his chamber, candles lit, incense smoldering, scrolls stacked neatly but unopened. Solomon kneels by his window, not in prayer, in thought, and that might be worse. Because thought is quieter than rebellion, more acceptable than idolatry, and far more dangerous when left unchecked. You glance at a scroll half unrolled beside him. It's from Deuteronomy, the part that warns kings not to take many wives, not to let their hearts be turned away, not to gather excessive silver or horses from Egypt. Solomon knows it. He's read it. But knowledge is not obedience. And wisdom left untended becomes pride wearing a mask of discernment. He runs his hand through his hair. It wasn't her, he says, it was me. The woman on the rooftop fades from the dream, not condemned, not blamed, just released. This part of the dream is about Solomon, the version of him that lingered too long in his own desires. And perhaps in that you see a shadow of yourself. Not in his royalty, but in his forgetting. How easy it is to be gifted. How easy it is to be drifting. How softly ruin enters when we mistake having wisdom for being wise. Solomon stands. He walks back toward the table, picks up the scroll, rolls it tightly, sets it aside. Not discarded, just postponed. And in that pause, the dream leaves you with a curious kind of grief. Not for what was done, but for what was neglected. You sit beside him, neither of you speak. But inside the silence, you hear the first words he once asked God echo back. Give me an understanding heart. And in this moment, it's clear, understanding must not only be received. It must be maintained, watered, honored, protected from the slow poison of distraction. Solomon bows his head, not in shame, but in the quiet return to a prayer he once prayed in purity. The moon shifts, the rooftop fades, and the dream continues. Softer now, but not easier. Because even wisdom wears wounds. The dream doesn't brighten, it deepens. You find yourself in a tower. Not the kind with guards and flags, but a quiet, contemplative structure built of stone, shadow, and silence. It rises impossibly high, spiraling toward heaven, yet you feel no weight in the climb. Solomon ascends before you barefoot again, hands lightly grazing the walls as he walks. This is the place I built in vision, he says. Not for others to see, but for God to watch me. You follow him upward through corridors filled with filtered light. No candles, no windows. Just light itself as if the stones hum softly with the presence of the Almighty. At the top, a single chamber. Circular, empty, except for one thing, a window. Narrow, arched, and facing north. You approach it with Solomon. He doesn't look out. He stands beside it, head bowed slightly, as if listening for something only that side of the sky can say. You peer through, but there's no view, only stars. No ground, no horizon. Just stars suspended like questions that haven't yet been answered. Solomon finally speaks. I called this the Tower of the Watchful Heart. You wait. Then he adds, because even the heart must watch itself. You turn. There's no furniture, no altar, just symbols etched into the walls, some Hebrew, some foreign, some so old they look like they were carved in dream before language took form. You run your fingers along one of them. It glows faintly. Then you see it. A pattern the shape of an eye cradled by a tear, pierced by a flame. What does it mean, you ask? Solomon doesn't answer directly. Instead, he says, this was the place I came when I didn't trust myself. A pause. When power grew too quiet. When wisdom started sounding like my own voice instead of God's. You feel a weight in his words, not shame, awareness. Here in this tower, you begin to grasp something vast. Even kings must have a higher place to kneel. Even wise hearts must be watched. Some scholars believe Solomon had a physical tower built within the temple compound, a chamber for private prayer and observation. Others say this tower is entirely symbolic, a metaphor for the contemplative soul, ever watching the intentions that hide behind good decisions. And some mystics whisper that this watchtower was where angels once stood, guardians of a wisdom too bright for daylight. You hear something, not with ears, with spirit. A whisper not threatening, not soothing, just true. Not every fall comes from pride. Some come from tiredness pretending to be clarity. You turn. Solomon is seated now, knees drawn to his chest, back against the cold wall. Not kingly, childlike, and somehow more royal than ever. I used to come here before battles, he says, before judgments, before love. Did it help, you ask? He smiles faintly. It didn't answer my questions. A pause. But it made me ask better ones. The stars through the narrow window shift, one blinking then another. You count 7 flickering in strange harmony. You wonder if they're watching you, or if you're watching yourself through them. You lie on the stone floor. It should be cold, but it isn't. You close your eyes and suddenly you can feel your own heart not racing, not aching. Observing. This is what Solomon built when the world outside grew loud. A place to listen for the still, small voice again. And now you have it too. Not a tower of stone, a space within you, a chamber above the noise. You drift. And from that window, the stars keep watch, just like your heart does now. The dream shifts again, and now the air feels older, dusty, heavy. You're not in a palace, not in a tower, not even in a dream temple. You're underground, somewhere forgotten. The walls are stone, cold, cracked, and before you a sealed chamber half buried beneath years of silence. You run your fingers across the surface of its door, a slab of limestone etched with a seal you can't read. But Solomon can. He approaches, pressing his palm to the center. The door shivers, then opens slowly, reverently. Inside the space glows with a dim amber light. There are no torches, no candles, just a subtle luminescence like the memory of fire living in the stone. In the center of the room lies a scroll, wrapped in linen, unmarked, unopened. Solomon doesn't reach for it. Not yet. He kneels beside it as if in prayer. This, he says softly, is what I never showed anyone. You sit beside him. The scroll seems to breathe. He doesn't touch it, not even now. I wrote it when I began to drift, he says, when I still knew I was drifting, before I forgot. You lean closer. You expect it to be some secret prophecy, maybe a forbidden psalm or a lost proverb. But no, it's a confession, not of sins, of questions, unanswered ones, written by a man who had everything and still found the edges of the map. You watch as Solomon unwraps just a corner. One line glows faintly. What use is light if the eye prefers shadow? He smiles sadly. I didn't mean it as despair, he says. I meant it as a warning. You glance at the next line. Wisdom hoarded becomes a weight. Wisdom shared becomes a wind. The chamber seems to breathe with you. Some traditions say Solomon recorded hidden teachings, not to keep them from the world, but to preserve them until the right soul came looking. Others claim he hid writings out of fear they'd be misunderstood, twisted, used not for illumination, but for influence. And perhaps that's what this scroll is. Not a secret, a safeguard. You unroll another fragment. The letters shimmer, then rearrange, then settle into something more personal. A question directed at you. Have you begun to treasure what cannot be bought? You don't answer. You can't. Not yet. But the scroll seems satisfied with your silence. Solomon exhales. I sealed it away, he says, so I wouldn't forget that even wisdom has limits. He wraps the scroll again and returns it to its resting place, not hiding it, not locking it, just honoring it. You look around the chamber now and realize something odd. There are no walls anymore. The room has dissolved into a field of stars. And the scroll still glows at the center, as if it belongs not just to Solomon, but to you. You close your eyes. You feel it now, the truth behind the truth. That wisdom doesn't always answer. Sometimes it waits, until you're ready. You reach out not to open the scroll, but to remember it. And that's when you hear the last line Solomon ever wrote before he sealed it. God is not found in the answers, he is found in the asking. You open your eyes. The scroll is gone, but the glow remains. So does the question, and it walks beside you now. The dream carries you forward, but now it pulses with legend, not memory. You find yourself standing in a room that doesn't exist on any map. The walls are obsidian, the floor polished like glass, yet the air hums with warmth and story. In the center, resting on a pedestal shaped like a flame, 3 rings. Solomon steps into the light, his hands behind his back. He doesn't reach for them, not yet. His voice comes soft but certain. These, he says, were never worn at the same time. You walk closer. Each ring glows differently, one gold, one silver, one made of something you can't quite name. It shifts between light and shadow as though cast from both. Solomon gestures toward the first ring, the gold one. This was the ring of authority, he says. Given to me when I asked for wisdom. It bore the seal. You remember it, the stories of the seal of Solomon said to command spirits to know the names of angels and demons. You look closely now and see a star carved into the metal. 6 points, ancient, burning softly. Some say the ring came from the archangel Michael. Others say it came directly from heaven, dropped like dew into Solomon's palm during a midnight prayer. Whatever the source, you feel its weight. This ring, he continues, taught me to speak. Then he nods toward the second, the silver one. It's smaller, humbler. You notice Hebrew lettering around its edge, though it flickers faintly between alphabets. This ring feels different, more personal. It's the ring of reflection, Solomon says. I wore it in the quiet seasons, when answers didn't come easily, when I needed to remember who I was. Some versions of the tale say this was the ring that bore the phrase, "This too shall pass," a reminder to keep the heart soft during triumph and steady during sorrow. Solomon touches it but doesn't lift it. This one, he says, taught me to listen. Finally, the third ring, the strange one. You stare at it. It isn't made of metal. It seems to shimmer with time itself shifting like the surface of deep water under moonlight. He doesn't name this ring right away. You wait. Then he says, "This one I never wore." You look at him. It's called the Ring of Truth, he explains. But not the truth we speak, the truth we can't. He pauses. This ring teaches restraint, what not to say, what not to reveal, what the soul must hold even when the lips ache to confess. You reach for it instinctively, but your fingers stop short. It's not forbidden, just not yours. Solomon continues. Each ring served its season. The first made me powerful, the second made me human. The third, he looks away for a moment, reminded me I was still becoming. Some scholars claim there was only one ring, that the tales were confused, merged, split across generations. Others insist 3 existed, passed down in secret to those ready to receive them, each bearing a different light, a different burden. Tonight, the dream suggests something more, that perhaps the rings were not objects, but choices. 3 lessons, 3 postures of the heart to speak, to listen, and to withhold. Solomon steps aside now. You'll wear one of these in your waking life, he says. Maybe all 3, but not at once. You kneel before the pedestal not to choose, but to remember. Each ring pulses once. And in that flicker, you feel your soul shift slightly, like a key turning in a lock you didn't know was there. The rings fade not into nothing, but into you. And Solomon, watching, smiles. You're wiser now, he says, because you didn't grab them. You listened first. You rise. The dream lifts. And for a moment, you feel your hands glowing faintly, as if something old and sacred is now resting in your palms. Invisible, but eternal. Night has fallen again in the dream, not the cozy night of candles and rest, but a deeper, lonelier night. The stars are there, but they flicker without warmth. The moon hides behind a thin veil of cloud. The air is still. Solomon walks beside you slower now. He doesn't speak. You're in a place that doesn't echo, not quite a desert, not quite a chamber, just absence. And in that absence, a strange truth begins to rise. There was a night, Solomon says, when the stars refused to speak. You stop walking. He doesn't explain immediately. He just sits on a stone ledge that wasn't there a moment ago. His robe folds around him like shadows around a flame. You sit beside him. He looks up, and nothing looks back. I had a dream once, he says slowly, where heaven did not answer. You say nothing. There were no visions, no voices, no warmth, just stillness so complete it started to echo in my bones. You feel it now, that terrible hush. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, but challenges. Not a pause in conversation, a withdrawal. Some say God always speaks, Solomon says. But I've learned sometimes he's quiet because he already has spoken. The dream leans inward, now pulling you into that very moment. You're back in his chamber, only this time there are no scrolls open, no oil lamp burning. Just Solomon awake at midnight, surrounded by everything he built, but with no one answering. And for the first time he looks afraid. Not of enemies, not of death, of being abandoned by meaning. You look around. The walls seem farther away than they should be. The floor beneath you feels like a ledge above a void. Not danger, just detachment. This was the most honest night of my life, he whispers. When I stopped hearing God, not because he was gone, but because I was. You inhale sharply, not in fear, in recognition. 'Cause maybe you've had a night like that. Maybe you're having one now. A season where the stars go dim and the heavens go quiet. Not out of punishment, but out of something more mysterious. Permission to feel the silence, to sit inside it. To listen not with ears, but with endurance. Some say Solomon's later years were marked by confusion, even spiritual drift. That he built high places to foreign gods. That he wandered from Yahweh's instruction. Others argue those stories were exaggerated, written with disappointment rather than clarity. But the truth tonight isn't about theology. It's about emptiness. Even Solomon, the wisest man, the beloved of God, the builder of the temple, had nights where he looked up and saw nothing looking back. And here's what he learned. Wisdom includes silence, not the kind we control, the kind we can't, the kind that asks no questions, and answers even less. You sit beside him as the dream shifts slightly, not brighter but quieter still. A single candle appears. He doesn't light it. He watches it, and it glows not from flame but from stillness itself. He speaks once more. Eventually the stars spoke again, but not with words, with light, just quiet light. You nod, because that's enough. The dream doesn't resolve this moment. It doesn't fix it, it just holds it. And Solomon stands. Some nights God whispers, he says. Some nights he waits. Then he adds so softly you almost miss it. And some nights he watches to see if you'll wait too. You breathe. Not for clarity. Not for warmth. Just to remind yourself you're still here. And the silence accepts you, exactly as you are. The silence lifts, but it doesn't leave. It lingers behind your steps like a veil pulled gently across the dream. You walk now through a hallway of arches, each carved with names you don't recognize. Names of kings, prophets, poets, and failures. The walls feel close, but the air feels honest. You glance toward Solomon. He's walking slower again. Not because he's tired, because he's heavier. The dream has shifted into something more intimate. Not external wisdom, internal weight. You descend a staircase that seems to spiral not downward, but inward. The further you walk, the more you feel it, a sorrow that doesn't crush, but fills. Like water rising in a well that hasn't been visited in years. At the bottom is a room. Small, empty stone bench, no throne, no altar, just Solomon. And his crown, lying beside him, unworn. You sit near him. He doesn't look at you. His eyes stay on the crown. Not with longing, not with pride, with lament. There were nights, he says softly, when I wished I'd asked for peace instead of wisdom. You wait. I thought I wanted understanding. But sometimes understanding shows you too much. The room sighs. He picks up the crown and sets it gently in his lap. It looks lighter than you expected. Almost delicate, as if it's more memory than metal. I heard everyone's burdens, he says. I solved disputes, answered riddles, judged wisely. But no one taught me how to carry myself. He looks at you now, and he's not King Solomon. He's not the wise one. He's a man who got tired. Theological debates around Solomon's fall vary. Did he truly abandon God? Was it his wives, his wealth, his pride? Or was it more subtly an erosion, a soft sorrow that came not from rebellion but from overextension? Maybe he poured out so much wisdom he forgot to refill. Maybe you felt that too. You look at the crown again. It begins to shimmer not with glory but with memory. You see flashes inside its golden curve. Solomon comforting a child. Solomon alone in the temple at dusk. Solomon writing a psalm he never shared. Solomon crying quietly as he watched his people worship false gods, unsure how to stop it. Each image is quick, each one true. He places the crown beside you now, not offering it, just sharing it. You both sit there, in the ache, and then he says something you don't expect. There is a kind of sadness that comes from wisdom. Not because it fails, but because it sees everything it can't fix. You breathe. And it's the deepest breath you've taken in the dream, because you know that sadness too. And yet within it is the seed of something sacred. Compassion. Solomon leans forward and picks up a small object from the ground, a fragment of an old harp string. He turns it in his fingers. I used to sing, he whispers, when I was younger, before the answers came too quickly. You feel something shift in the room. It's not joy, not exactly. It's release. The kind that comes when you realize even your regrets are welcome at the feet of God. Solomon stands again, leaves the crown behind. It's not what you wear, he says, that makes you wise. It's what you're willing to set down. You follow him out of the chamber, up the staircase, toward the light. The silence doesn't break. It just walks with you now. Not as weight, as witness. Light returns not harshly, but in waves. Golden soft like the hush just before sunrise. You step into an enormous courtyard, open to the sky. The air hums with stillness, though you can feel something pulsing underneath the surface. Something sacred. This is the temple, but not during construction. Not as blueprint. Not in ruins. This is the temple at its moment of breath, the day it was filled. You and Solomon stand at the far end of the courtyard. He wears no crown, no robe of splendor, just white linen, simple and pure. A silence hangs over the priests, over the crowd, over the king himself. Everyone is watching the doorway, and then it begins. A sound like nothing earthly, a deep rush like wind, meeting water fire speaking to stone. The temple doesn't shake. It inhales, and then the presence comes, not as a figure, not as fire or lightning, as cloud, thick, alive, holy. It pours into the temple like a wave of soft smoke, white but radiant. It wraps around pillars, glides along walls, sinks into every stone. It doesn't touch, it inhabits. The people gasp, the priests stagger, and then they fall face down, not out of fear, out of awe, because this is not metaphor. This is the Shekinah, the dwelling glory of the Lord, and it has chosen to live here. Solomon's face is unreadable, not proud, not triumphant. He is watching something he cannot control, something no offering, no plan, no architect could command. He turns to you and whispers, "This This was the moment I realized the temple didn't belong to me. And you feel it too. For all his wisdom, his prayers, his design, God came not because of what Solomon built, but because of who he is. You step inside now into the temple itself. The air is thick, fragrant with incense and mystery. The ark rests in the Holy of Holies, but you cannot see it clearly. The cloud swirls too densely. You feel your knees weakening, not in fear, in recognition. Some say this moment in Scripture was the climax of Solomon's reign, that the temple dedication was the high point before his slow descent. Others say this was a wedding, God choosing to dwell with his people in the heart of what they made sacred together. And still others believe this was not the peak, but the beginning. That God's glory doesn't arrive to end a story, but to begin it in truth. You walk further inside. The dream makes space for you. You stand at the edge of the holy place, watching the priests laid out like shadows before a sunrise. You see Solomon alone near the altar, his hands raised, his voice lifting in a prayer you can't quite hear, but you feel it. Every word etched in humility, every line woven with reverence. He is not asking for power, he is asking for presence. And presence has arrived. A breeze passes through the temple. You feel it kiss your cheek, warm and wet like breath. It smells like cedar and myrrh and something else. Memory. Your own memories, perhaps. Of moments when God felt near, when you didn't ask, when you didn't understand, when the silence broke not in thunder, but in being held. You glance back at the doorway. The cloud remains. It does not need to explain itself. It is enough. Solomon kneels now, forehead to stone. And so do you. Because in this moment, the only wisdom that matters is worship. Not of the temple, not of the king, of the God who fills the silence with himself. The dream doesn't end. It simply rests, like the cloud itself, settling into the walls of your spirit, a presence now planted deep, waiting to be remembered. The cloud has settled. The temple still glows with holy breath, but now the crowd has gone, the priests have withdrawn, and silence has returned not as absence, but as completion. You step softly through the courtyard's outer gates, and the dream leads you somewhere unexpected, not back to Solomon's throne, nor to the scrolls of wisdom. You walk to the outer court, the place where strangers stand, Gentiles, outsiders, those not born under covenant, not blood-linked to Abraham, yet drawn somehow to the God of Israel. A figure waits there, hooded. Still, Solomon stands nearby, watching from a distance, not with suspicion, with wonder. You draw closer. The man at the edge of the court doesn't approach the temple. He doesn't bow. He doesn't speak in Hebrew, but he prays. And though his words are foreign, the spirit in them is familiar. Yearning, humble, clear. Solomon walks forward slowly, reverently, and the man speaks. Through the dream, you understand the words not with language, but with meaning. I do not know your name, but I know you are real. Hear me not for my worth, but for your mercy. Solomon closes his eyes. You see it now, this man's prayer pierced the sky. No ritual, no robe, no lineage, just honesty, and it was enough. This, Solomon says softly, was the prayer I feared the most, because it reminded me God listens to hunger, not heritage. You feel it in your chest, a pull, a beautiful ache, that even here at the edge of covenant, God listens. Some commentators on Solomon's temple prayer point to this moment with awe, that he interceded for the foreigner, that he made space in the very architecture of worship for the one outside to be welcomed in. Others gloss over it, too quick to move on to the grandeur of the building, the lineage of kings, the fall and rise of empires. But tonight the dream holds this quiet moment like a pearl, a man without a name, a prayer without credentials, a God who hears anyway. You and Solomon sit on the stone ledge together just beyond the court. The stranger has gone, but the echo of his prayer remains like wind trapped between temple stones. Solomon speaks again, more to himself than to you. I built the temple to invite God in, but he reminded me that he was never outside to begin with. He laughs quietly, not mockingly, just amazed. You feel it too, that the most sacred moments are not always lit by torches. Sometimes they occur in the quiet prayer of someone who doesn't know the right words, but whose heart opens anyway. You look up. The stars are clear, gentle, no thunder, no angel choir, just peace. Solomon rises and places a hand on your shoulder. Remember this, he says. Sometimes the truest wisdom is not in answering. A pause. It's in making room for the question. You close your eyes. And there beside the temple's edge, the dream wraps around you like a prayer shawl, woven not from fabric, but from welcome. And God, he does not ask who you are. He listens. Because you came. You awaken inside the dream once more, not to dawn, but to dust. Faint light filters through a lattice of branches and time. The temple is gone now, or maybe not gone, just distant like a bell no longer ringing. You stand in a small courtyard surrounded by aged stone and shade. A breeze stirs the leaves, and a hush settles across the ground like a faded memory. Solomon sits near a low table, his robes simpler than before. He looks older here, not worn, but weathered, like parchment that's been folded many times yet never torn. You sit across from him and he gestures to a scroll beside him, not bound, not canonized. These are the proverbs never written. He slides the parchment forward and the dream lets you glimpse just a few. No ink, only meaning. You feel them rather than read them, like truths carried by wind instead of word. The fool speaks because he must. The wise wait until the silence opens a door. Another, what you hide from God, you hand to the darkness. What you confess, he weaves into mercy. And one more, wisdom is not the fire. It is the candle you shield from the wind. Solomon watches you. He does not explain. He doesn't have to. These, he says, were never for the public. They were for the night, for the moments when the crown was heavy and the throne too far from heaven. You feel the weight of that, not as sadness, as intimacy. Some believe the Book of Proverbs was a curated collection, some written by Solomon, others gathered in his name. Some edited, some erased. But tonight, the dream shows you what wasn't shared, not because it wasn't wise, but because it was too quiet for scrolls. Wisdom made for whispers. You take up one piece of parchment. The letters glow, then vanish, absorbed into you like breath into lungs. Not a lesson. A reminder that the deepest truths often live outside of explanation. Solomon leans back and exhales. I used to wonder if wisdom was what made me holy, he says, but it was never that. A pause. It was what kept me humble. The scrolls begin to lift one by one, floating upward into the air like ash from a sacred fire. Not burning, just ascending, vanishing into the sky without sound. You and Solomon sit in the silence they leave behind. It is not empty. It is exact. Some of the greatest things I ever understood, he says at last, I never dared to say aloud. He turns toward you, but perhaps you will. Not to command, not to impress, but to remember that wisdom is not for proving, it is for planting. In hearts, in silence. In dreams like this one, you close your eyes and a final whisper enters your spirit. Do not chase wisdom to be right. Let her walk beside you so you are not alone. The courtyard dims. The scrolls are gone, but they live inside you now. Unwritten, unspoken, undeniably present. The dream narrows now like the last turn of a winding path. Trees draw in close, tall, and quiet, their leaves dark with memory. You walk beside Solomon once more, but he doesn't speak. His eyes are distant. He's remembering someone. You follow his gaze and there she is, the Shulamite. Not in a garden, not veiled in perfume and poetry, but older, draped in shadow and light, walking slowly through the trees. She does not speak. She does not need to. Her return is quiet, and perhaps not entirely real. Some say she was a dream, Solomon murmurs, a metaphor, a spirit. You study her features. She's beautiful, but not the way a queen is beautiful. She's whole. She walks with the steadiness of someone who has nothing to prove. Others say she was his first love. Some say his truest. A few mystics suggest she was never a woman at all, but wisdom incarnate in longing. You don't need the answer tonight. You simply watch as Solomon walks to her, not with urgency, but with reverence, as if he's afraid that getting too close will make her vanish. But she doesn't. She takes his hand. No words, just a long, slow moment. You wonder what's passing between them. Forgiveness, memory, a reunion of body and soul. Maybe all of it, maybe none of it. Because this, whatever this is beyond tidy stories. You hear something overhead, a night bird softly calling once, then going still. The trees part slightly and moonlight floods the clearing. They stand in it together. And you see the contrast now, the king aged and heavy with wisdom, and the woman who remained light untethered. She is not bound by temple or title. She simply is. He touches her cheek and a single tear falls not down his face but hers. It lands on the ground. A lily blooms where it falls. And then she steps back. Not vanishing, just receding, like mist. Like a promise not broken but fulfilled in part. You stand with Solomon long after she leaves. He doesn't move. And then he says, some things are not meant to stay, but they return, just long enough to remind us what was real. A long silence. And then he adds, she taught me what worship felt like before I ever knew what it meant. The dream begins to dissolve the trees, now turning them to shadow, folding them into the wind. You look down. The lily remains. A final gift. A final echo. You bend to touch it, but Solomon places a hand gently on your shoulder. Leave it, he says. It's not for us to carry, only to remember. You nod. And in that nod, something quiet unlocks in your chest. Not longing, not loss, but peace. The kind that comes when you realize not all love is meant to stay. Some is meant to awaken, and that is enough. You walk together out of the grove. No one speaks. Because love this holy leaves no need for words. Only stillness, only thanks. The dream grows quieter now. Not smaller, just more refined, like a flame flickering lower before it settles into steady warmth. You walk with Solomon beneath a colonnade of twilight stone. The shadows are longer, the pace slower. He's older now than you've ever seen him in the dream, not merely in face or body, but in soul. The light in his eyes is softer but deeper, like a candle that's burned for decades and no longer flinches in the wind. This, he says gently, was my last true prayer. You feel it already, tonight's turning point. Not a final act, but a final return. You step into a chamber lit by no fire, only the memory of fire. At its center, a simple cushion. Solomon kneels. Not on marble, on dirt. No throne, no altar, just earth. You sit beside him. He folds his hands, closes his eyes, and begins to whisper, not to you, not even to himself, to God. You gave me what I asked, and more than I deserved, but tonight I ask again. His voice catches. You feel your own breath still, as if not to interrupt the moment. Give me an understanding heart, again, as you did when I was young, before I thought I knew too much. You feel it. That ripple of humility, not forced, not theatrical, just real. Solomon has circled back to his beginning. The boy king with trembling hands, overwhelmed by responsibility and filled with yearning. The one who didn't ask for riches or revenge, but for the ability to listen. Now in the final echoes of his life, he asks again, because true wisdom doesn't peak. It returns, over and over. Some scholars argue Solomon's wisdom faded as his wealth and pride increased, that by the end his heart had wandered far from God, that his prayers grew thin, hollow. But others point to Ecclesiastes, a book of weariness and warning, yes, but also of surrender. A man who tried everything, failed in many things, but still knew enough to say, fear God and keep his commandments. Tonight the dream offers no defense. It simply lets you sit with a man who has circled the spiral of wisdom and come back kneeling. He lifts his eyes, they're wet but not broken. My understanding grew, he says, but my heart had to catch up. You nod, because maybe that's your path too, to gain insight and then unlearn pride, to master skill and then reclaim wonder, to walk the wide roads of power and still find your knees at the end of them. He places one hand on the ground. Dirt, he says, is where all thrones begin, then more softly and where all wisdom returns. The dream begins to fade. Not vanish, bow out. The chamber becomes wind, the cushion light. Solomon's shape softens like a mountain seen through morning mist. You look down. A small phrase is written in the dust where he once knelt. Understanding is not arrival, it is return. You close your eyes and whisper the same prayer. Not because you lack wisdom, but because you want to keep becoming worthy of it. And the heavens, though quiet, listen. The dream quiets into its last deep current, slow and steady like the tide drawing in at midnight. You feel time bend, not forward, not backward, but inward. Around you, the world fades to dusk, and dusk fades to something beyond definition. You're standing at the edge of a vast garden, but the soil here is untouched. No vines, no lilies, just earth cool, still waiting. Solomon walks beside you slower than before, not weary, just ready. This, he says, looking ahead, is where the story ends for them. You glance at him, but not for you. He smiles but says nothing. You see it now, a resting place, not a tomb, a transition. There are no mourners here, no gold, no crown, no legacy etched in stone, only a folded linen cloak placed gently on a slab of rock. It bears the faint scent of myrrh, cedarwood, and parchment. Somewhere a breeze stirs, but there are no trees. Solomon steps into the clearing and stops. He looks up, not to heaven, to silence. And then he says the last thing he ever will in the dream. I lived long enough to know what wisdom cannot reach. You feel the weight of that, not as defeat, as reverence. Because there comes a point when knowing gives way to being, when understanding no longer explains. It simply watches. Scripture tells us Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. That's where the canon ends. But legends don't let it go so easily. Some say he never truly died, that he wandered east, leaving his kingdom behind, clothed in rags and revelation. that he disguised himself and became a teacher in foreign lands. Others whisper that he sleeps beneath the ruins of the temple, waiting to rise again when wisdom is needed most. Tonight, the dream offers no answer. Only this garden of stillness. Only this man shedding titles like garments. Only this moment unmarked by time. You kneel beside him not because he asks, but because your soul does. And for one brief instant, you see something impossible. His spirit rising, not as a ghost, as light. Thin, soft, no brighter than starlight, but rising, and not into the sky. Into you. You inhale and it settles inside your chest, not as doctrine, not as history, but as a presence. Solomon's wisdom is not gone. It's alive, not as memory, as echo, as quiet guidance. You look again at the cloak. It hasn't moved, but the garden has shifted. There are footprints now small and faint walking in both directions toward the silence and back. You rise slowly, because the dream has one final gift, a whisper wrapped in dusk and certainty. He who walks with wisdom never walks alone, even when he sleeps. The earth holds its breath, and then exhales, and so do you. Because Solomon may have gone to sleep, but something of him is still awake in the night, in the wind, in the voice that guides you home when all light fades. The dream draws in like evening tide, not to close, but to cradle. You walk now through the final corridor, paved not with stone or gold, but with light itself. Soft silver blue, the color of starlight filtered through memory. There is no temple here, no throne, no scrolls or crowns or gates. Only silence, only space. And a sense that something is about to complete, not finish, but arrive. You feel it before you see it a presence. Solomon walks beside you again, but this time, younger. Not the child from Gibeon, not the judge from the throne room, not the elder in the dust. All of them, all at once. His eyes hold every age he's ever lived, bright with wisdom, soft with sorrow, wide with wonder. He places something in your hand. You don't look right away. You feel it first. Smooth. Cool. Familiar. It's a small stone inscribed with a single symbol, a heart pierced by a listening ear. You close your hand around it. Everything I saw, Solomon says, everything I lost, everything I loved. He pauses. Was worth it. You nod. Not because you fully understand, but because some truths don't need understanding. They just need to be honored. You and Solomon walk forward one last time. The path rises gently. The stars open wider, and then he stops. Not because he's gone, but because this part of the path is yours now. He places his hand on your shoulder and smiles. Not like a king, not like a prophet, like a friend who knows you'll be okay, even when the dream ends, especially then. He turns away and walks into the horizon, not disappearing, joining it. And now you stand alone, but not truly, because Solomon's story is no longer just a memory. It's part of your own. You inhale deeply, and the final whisper enters soft and bright. Wisdom lives wherever the heart chooses to listen. The path fades. The light stills. The dream slows. And now you lie there, body at rest, breath soft and steady, soul, still drifting somewhere between thought and sleep. Let the silence wash over you like warm linen. Let your heartbeat echo the rhythm of the stars Solomon once studied. Let your mind settle into the ancient hush, the hush that held a boy king in Gibeon. A temple in smoke, a crown on the floor, and a prayer whispered long after the world had stopped listening. You are safe here. Wisdom has not left you. It lingers in your breath. It lives in your questions. It speaks not loudly, but faithfully, in the spaces you've begun to leave open. In stillness, in grace, in pauses between thoughts. Tonight you've walked beside a man who knew glory and grief, a king who could command the sky and still forget how to pray. And yet he found his way again. So will you. So just rest. Let go of the weight, the questions, even the need to understand. You do not need answers right now. You only need stillness. Imagine Solomon's final garden, soft earth, open sky, a breeze that carries no demands. Imagine the lily blooming where the tear once fell. Breathe that in. Let your soul lie down beside it. Let the story end not with noise, but with knowing. You are held. You are heard. And the God who gave Solomon wisdom watches over your sleep now with gentleness, not judgment. So close your eyes. Let the dream fade. And remember, sometimes the wisest thing you can do is simply rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.